Today's talk is a meta talk. And I didn't really plan on giving a talk today, and so I don't really think of this as a talk, more of a discussion. There's some other folks here, I think, who have a lot to contribute to it, so we should, jump in. I wanted to give it, here's a truth about me. The path that led to me sitting in this chair here today started with a talk. Right? I'm without ambition, and I'm a terrible blogger. Right? I'm not carrying my weight out in the big world, and I submitted because of feelings of intense guilt about not giving back, I submitted a proposal to Garuko in 2009 and gave a talk on object-oriented design. And that talk now has like 12,000 views. I gave it to 250 people, and every time I go anywhere, someone comes up to me in the hall and says, "That time I met Johnny, I saw your talk." So doing that changed my life. Now, I don't know if you want to change your lives. It strikes me that your lives are pretty good. Right? You might be right. You might be really happy right where you are. But one of the things that I've noticed this week in my conversations with people is that there are a number of people here who have a talk in them, and they don't know how to give it. They don't know how to get across the barrier and be not someone who thinks they might want to give a talk, to instead become someone who has given a talk. And so I'm interested in what the hows and whys of things work. I'm interested in sort of the emotional content. I'm interested in how we relate to each other, and I've thought a lot about that in relation to talks. So I'm going to tell you how I view a talk today, and then we're going to talk. I would be interested in other people who've given talks, given their perspectives, and then we'll see where the discussion goes. So there are three issues. If you're thinking about giving a talk, there are three main categories of things, and each of these constitutes a problem, an obstacle that you have to overcome. The first problem is the talk itself. You have to know how to do a talk. The second problem is the audience. The way it is, it might not be so bad to give a talk if only no one were listening. I had the same experience writing the book. The experience of writing the book was, I did it in isolation at 5 in the morning at my computer every day for a couple of years. And that was one thing. And then people started reading it. And that was a really different experience. The experience of making a talk and having an idea about a talk and the physical experience of giving it and dealing with the audience is a completely different obstacle. And the final obstacle is, of course, you. Because even if you have a talk and even if you have an audience, if you don't overcome the things that keep you from being able to actually do it, you're never going to have a talk. So, the talk itself. In some ways that seems like the biggest problem, but it's actually the smallest. Every talk is a story. And you're going to tell people a story. The success of your talk depends on how you tell it. And that's all there is to it. You have to learn to tell a story. And there are practical techniques that you can read to understand how to hold the audience's attention while you tell a story. And there's stuff you can read. This woman, Nancy Duarte, has studied it. She's an academic. And she does things. She took apart the M.L. King, I Have a Dream talk, and she charted it. There's graphs about why she categorized the things that she was saying and how she was talking about it, and did a pacing and timing thing. You can study the research done by people who have studied talks that made a difference in the world and learn how to structure a talk. And so this isn't something you need to be born knowing, and it's not something you have to figure out for yourself. You can just go do the research and figure out how to do a talk. Sorry, I don't know what happened to that, but I have not read this book, but a number of people here have pointed out to me that I should, and I suspect, I'm making this up, I suspect that it also contains a lot of very practical information about how to structure the physical talk itself. And so, you don't, and actually, Ro, thank you, sent me this last night. This has a number of this deals with a number of these categories, but one of the things it deals with is the physical mechanics of actually giving a talk. And so, despite the fact that if right now you may feel like the talk itself is the biggest problem, it's actually the smallest problem. It's a technical problem, and you're technical people, and you're used to solving technical problems. You can get information that will let you structure a talk that has a story that matters and holds people's attention. And so we're going to dismiss that as an issue. The next issue is them. This is your audience. And here's this is the truth about audiences. They want to love you. They are ready to love you. You have to talk them out of loving you. And so these fears that I have a book reference later, a guy named Scott Berkram, who wrote Confessions of a Public Speaker. And he talks about the biology of having a lot of eyes on you. And the biology of having a lot of eyes on you is it's terrifying. It's at an animal level. And so there are things that feel really scary when you're in the front that aren't actually really scary. They don't want to eat you, they want to love you. If you're nervous, they are rooting for you. The audience is on your side in a way that is hard to believe if you've never been up there. But it's really true. And so that's the thing you can sort of take home with you. And they want to love not only you, but they want to love your story. You don't have to go very far to make a story that will engage people. There's just a few things you have to understand and do about how audiences work to catch them and hold them for the entire length of your talk. And so this is the bottom line about that, right? Don't screw it up. There are things about people, there are things about how people learn and how attention works that you can use to your advantage. And the things are that we're all a big bunch of subconscious processing power covered by a thin veneer of talking consciousness that acts as a press agent and explains things. If you want to catch people, you have to hook into their emotions. Nothing else matters. Did anybody take the moral, probably you haven't had time, the survey? Like, you take that survey, you will find that some of those questions catch you on an emotional level, and you can feel yourself reacting emotionally and then explaining afterwards. In the audiences, you have to reach at that level. There's no piece of technical information good enough to hold their information if you don't hook it into how they can change the world, into their purpose and autonomy and mastery. Like, that's what people want, and when you hook in at that level, you make a talk that changes people's lives. Not only do they have emotions, but they really like pictures, right? It's okay for them to hear that and it's because of, again, it's that unconscious processing power. Movement and color mean there's a predator in the woods. We are hardwired to notice things, for our attention to snap back to that stuff. Talk. We are not hardwired to parse words. And so this is these two things, that they have emotions and they like pictures, go along with this third thing. It's that attention lasts 10 minutes. And woe be unto you if you do not know that. Because here's what people need to know. They need to know that it's going to end in 10 minutes. And so you have a challenge in a 30 or 45-minute talk, because you have to tell them every 10 minutes that you're going to tell them the thing, and it's only going to last 10 minutes. They have to have hope that it will end, or they're going to go read their email. And when you lose them, when one person opens their computer, we are a social group. And that is a signal to the other people in that row and to all the people behind them that it's time to open your computer. You can lose the whole audience by losing one person. And so in the beginning, there's a bunch of, the talk techniques themselves. There are lots of practical talk techniques that let you recapture attention every 10 minutes. It can be as simple as, like, we all hate that thing as the school thing. Like, I'm going to tell you, here's what I'm going to tell you, and here's what I told you, right? You can't really do that because it makes everybody be like, oh, I'm in school now. But there are lots of very subtle cues that you can give about how long it's going to be and when it's going to be over, and that I've finished that thing and I'm going on to the next thing. And those things are absolutely critical parts of every talk, because these things come hardwired in your audience. And so if you'll hook into their emotions, you'll show them pictures, and you'll let them know that it's going to end within 10 minutes, you can tell any story that will engage and hold their attention for the length of time that you have. So, and those things are kind of easy. You can learn them too. Right? It's just research. You can just go read the research and know how to do it, and put up a black slide every 10 minutes and step out from under the lectern, and the eyes all turn to you. It wakes them back up. And you can feel it when you're up there. So those two things, it and them, are not the problem. And if you've been wanting to give a talk and you haven't done it yet, you may be saying that you don't know how to give a talk, but that's really not what's keeping you from doing it. This is why you haven't given a talk. You're afraid that you're an imposter. with nothing useful to say. Now, I know you feel that way because I feel that way. And I know that we feel that way because everyone feels that way. You are not alone in the feeling that there's a circumstance in which you will, there's a place, it could happen that you will be exposed to be the fraud you are. And the truth is, I don't know where that voice in our heads comes from, but we all have it, and it's just not true. And so you can't deal with that. You can't deal with that voice by denying it. Right? If you deny it, if you won't accept that the thing that's keeping you from making a talk is that you're afraid, then that thing, it's a thing you can't look at and it drives you around. And so turning and embracing that fear and recognizing that it's a part of the common human condition and it's a thing you can hold in your head and not have it affect your behavior is the most important barrier that you have to overcome before you can give a talk. Scott Burkham talks a lot. So now I'm going to give you a couple of books. Confessions of a Public Speaker, it's great. He talks about being afraid. He talks about the mechanism of being afraid. And it's really handy because if you're afraid, what you'll find is you're not alone. There's something about reading it in a book that makes it like, oh, normal. It's not just me, right? Somebody wrote it down. So you're afraid you're going to die. This book is probably one of the most influential books I've ever read. It's unfortunately named because it seems like you wouldn't buy it unless you were a choker. She's an academic. She teaches at some university somewhere. I cannot pronounce her name. It is a book that is a survey of the research about how people perform under pressure and what happens under pressure that keeps you from performing your best, even if you're smart and well prepared. If you fail at time of performance, she knows why. She's done the research, and every place where there's a failure, she gives you a strategy that can be used to overcome the chance that you will fail in that case, even if you're prepared and well practiced. The book is divided into two major parts. One part is about physical performance, and one part is about mental performance, test taking, public speaking. The easiest example to give you is about physical performance. I don't know who here has done an athletic endeavor so much that you learn to do it, it's ingrained in you. I played softball a lot in my younger days, back in the day, and I was one of those second basemen who got to where they could not throw to first base. Right? The ball comes, you feel it, you pick it up, and then it's like thinking takes over. And I would be shot putting and throwing at the first baseman's feet, like the unconscious physical mechanism that I had done a million times. I started thinking about it. So there's a bunch of research that says all the physical activities that are well practiced have to run on autopilot. They're driven out of your unconscious mind, and if you think about them, you interfere with that process. The thing that she deals with is putters, professional putters that get what they call the yips, so they can't putt anymore. And it turns out that there's a very practical strategy that you can use to stop yourself from overthinking. Like I would overthink, and then I would overthink the overthinking. Like, God damn it, don't do that. Stop it. Quit thinking about it, right? Which, believe me, does not help. Did not improve my performance. What they have, in the cases where you're trying to get your conscious brain out of the way so your unconscious brain can take over and perform, she has people sing row, row, row your boat in there internally. Fill up working memory. Fill up working memory, you cannot have thoughts. All right, so that is an example of the kind of solution-oriented book this is. There are very specific strategies in here about how to do public speaking, how to perform your best when you're well-practiced and you want to get up there and do it and you're afraid that you'll screw it up. There are things that you can do that will make you feel better and make you perform well in that situation. So I would really recommend to everybody in here, if you want to speak and some of these things are holding you back, go get this book and read the research and do these things. So I'm done. These are all my slides. The bottom line, here's the bottom line. The difference between you, look at me. Who am I? They browbeat me to give me a talk, and then somebody made me write a book, and now I'm sitting here. I am no different than you. The thing I have to say, the reason people want to hear me say it is it's my tiny little niche that I'm passionate about, and I feel very confident that every one of you has a niche. There's something you are more interested in and better at than most everybody in the world, and that thing people are ready to listen to. So the difference between you and speakers is that they speak. That's all there is to it, nothing else. So I'm done. That's my little pep talk. I want to hear. There are some people in here in particular this week that I've been banging on about speaking. So let me say one more thing. I'm willing to listen to your talks in advance in the privacy of a Google Hangout. I'm willing to listen to your ideas about talks in advance in a Google Hangout. I've been doing that for other people who want to give talks. I love it. It seems like fun to me, not work. So don't feel constrained about asking if that's a thing that you think might be useful. It would be a small thing I can do to pay back for all the fun I've had this week. We also have other folks here who have given. Who all here has stood? Okay, there's user group talks. Who's given a user group talk? Small talk. So who's given a talk on a bigger stage that was scarier? So 4 of you. Who wants to give a talk on a bigger stage? Who is idly considered giving a talk on a bigger stage and has been held back because they are afraid as opposed, yeah. So, I mean, look around. Here, wait.
I'm keeping my hand up this entire time.
Yeah. So fear, it's clear that it is not that people give talks because they are not afraid. It's not that they're different than you on the fear front at all. They're just dealing with it, and they find some way to deal with it that doesn't get in their way of them doing it. So I'm done, really. Questions, or I would be interested in other people's experience. Like, how did you, Paul, how did you get to give a talk? How did that happen that you were doing it?
When I first started working here, I had been to conferences. I had never given a talk of any kind, really. I had given lunch and learn presentations and things, internally at other companies, but never anything in public. And Obi actually yammered before RailsConf and was like, I want everybody to submit talks to RailsConf. And it's clicked, I was like, I could submit a talk to a conference. That never even crossed my mind before.
It didn't seem like a possibility.
Yeah, that's something other people do. And then, I was like, well, that's a great idea, but what do I talk about? And I was talking to Lark years ago about that when I was going through all this, and he told me that the things we do here every day for a lot of other people are amazing. It's way more advanced, we're on the cutting edge. So the things that we're doing are very interesting to other people. They seem mundane to us, but other people love hearing about it. Just our process, our tools, all of it. So don't be afraid to talk about something that seems like a commonplace everyday thing here, because for a lot of other people it isn't.
I can attest to that, right? I'm watching you. I got to go home and change my whole tool chain because what I saw you guys do this week. So, a talk, I can promise you there are a lot of people out there who aren't using Pry, Vim, and TMUX. I've read about them. I've watched some Vimcasts. I mean to do it. Every time I pair with someone who's using TextMate, I feel like I have to get back in that environment. But I'm going to go home with a commitment to do better because I've seen you guys be more efficient with those tools. And a talk, telling people to use it, don't think the world is like you. It's not.
Even at RailsConf this past year in Austin, there was a dude who gave a talk. It was like intro to CoffeeScript. CoffeeScript's part of Rails. It comes as the default gem set, or the gem file. And so you would think a lot of people use it. And his talk, it was an intro level, but it was still really good. And even for people who were familiar with CoffeeScript, he touched on some things that you probably have forgotten, or that may not have known about. It was presenting it from kind of a different perspective. And so even though people are talking about things that you think that so many people know about, you're going to present some ideas, some perspective on it that hasn't been presented before, because your perspective on those things is somewhat unique.
Yeah.
Sandi, what about the fear of rejection? So, you're putting yourself out there, offering to give a talk and you get rejected.
Having your proposal get rejected, or feeling rejected after you get because of people's reaction to your talk?
No. When you want to present, but you get turned down.
It's a tough thing because it's there are a lot of forces at work in who gets picked to speak at a conference. The conference organizers are in a real bind because if they pick known quantities, they can predict the quality of the talk. And if they pick strangers and open it up to the new world, then they're playing sort of potluck. And so, it's I know for Gogoruko that's coming up, I think one in, don't quote me, I'm probably wrong, there were probably one talk, one of every 7 proposals got picked for a talk. I think for the bigger, I don't know what your odds are. And so on some very basic level, you can't take it personally because the chances are you won't win, right? It's like a lottery. But there are things you can do to improve your chances of winning. We had a conversation at dinner last night about how, we've probably all done it. You go to talk and you go to a conference, you pay your money, you get a plane ticket, and some schmuck gets up on stage and says, oh, sorry, I was working on my slides this morning. And I just want to shoot him. It's like, why am I here? Like 200 people, like multiply that by our hourly rate. Like, don't waste my time. It's so offensive, so offensive. So the conference organizers are desperate to avoid that situation while at the same time picking new faces. And so if you're a new face, and you can give them enough information to understand that your talk will be good, you can dramatically improve your chance of getting picked. And what that means maybe is prepping a talk on spec and giving it and getting it recorded and sending them a link. And you guys, I mean, you're so set up to do that, right? You don't have any, like for me it would be kind of a pain to get a talk recorded except at a conference. But for you, every one of you, you could do lunch and learns here and submit the CFP and just send them the link to the video. And I can guarantee you that would dramatically increase a stranger's chance of being picked. On top of that, all the conference organizers know all the people that they get to give talks. A personal recommendation by someone they trust really, really matters. And so you need to find people, if you, like the 7 degrees of separation, right? You know someone that's given a talk that's probably well received. Get them to help you, get them to mentor you and watch your talk and refer to them when you in your CFP.
Yeah, so we do. We know you.
There you go. I mean, I'm really committed. Like I opened up the crack of trying to get more women to speak, right? Which is an issue that's close to my heart. But now that I'm here, I want you guys all to talk too. Like, and I have cred, it's the weirdest thing, right? You know me, you should use it. I'm having 15 minutes of fame. Like, I can help get other people through the door, and I would love to make a world where it was really hard for me to get a speaking gig. That would be so cool. That would be a real win. That would feel like a real win for me. If the quality of talks was so high and so many people realized that they had things to say and would compete to say it, that I couldn't get a foot in the door. Think of how great the conferences would be if that were the case. So yeah, Johnny and I have already talked about me watching his meetup talk. So, go.
When I got accepted to a talk to jQueryConf, it just happened that about a week prior to them doing that review and making that decision, I got contacted by one of the jQuery core team guys because I had forked one of his plugins way before that. He wanted to talk to me about some of that, and we were kind of talking through the code and the changes that I had made. At the end, I was like, "Hey, I submitted a talk to jQueryConf. Like, are you going to be there?" He's like, "Oh yeah, I'm helping to make the decision on who's going to talk." And I was like, "Well, I would really love to come and speak at this conference." And he's like, "Well, okay." and then there I was speaking at the conference. I ran into when we were at Nordic Group. I was making the rounds. Whenever I go to a conference, I talk to everybody, anybody and everybody. And I ran into Marty, who is one of the organizers for Rocky Mountain Ruby, and I was like, "Hey, I submitted a talk to your conference. I'd really love to come out and blah blah blah." And like, if I'm not speaking, then I don't know if I'll be able to make it, but because that's true. Because Hashrocket will pay if I'm speaking and not if I'm not, right?
I mean, so talk about the social awkwardness.
And there I am.
Like, what are you asking for when you tell an organizer, "Hey," like, are you asking for a favor? Are you saying, "Please pick up my bag because I'm not supposed to carry things"? Like, there's some very awkward feeling about, okay, I'm asking you, what is that, right? There's a social barrier that keeps you from saying that to conference organizers. There's a follow-up email that says, "By the way, I submitted and I'm really interested." And so from your end, like, it feels like there's social constraints that keep us from doing that. Like, we're bugging them or we're asking them and we don't deserve it. But from the other end, it makes you stand out. And so, believe me, it isn't a big burden to get that email. And they gotta know, you have to have some way to make yourself be known. And the personal touch, right? Paul's talking at Rocky Mountain. Let's just say, right? And maybe it wouldn't have happened without this.
I have no idea if that played into it or not. But when I was talking, I said more than that to him. I was telling him about the talk and and my experience and kind of things I want to share. And I think having that conversation, giving them that extra context, really helps give you a leg up.
I mean, what they want, like, they don't feel bugged. What they want to know is that you're going to make the slides before the day before, and that you're someone who's not going to fall down on stage, be paralyzed with fright. And the social ability to make that connection in a graceful way conveys tons of information that are very reassuring to conference organizers. And so don't, follow up with email, ask your friends who might know them to mention that you're doing it. Like it is a social network, and I mean, it's like you're not trying to get an unfair advantage, you're just trying to provide them with enough information to make a judgment that's accurate about you. So I'd be interested if I can interrupt Ro. So Ro,
Yeah.
so your very first talk?
Your past is 10 minutes.
What was actually
I
part
was
of it?
writing down the name of the book as well.
So I want to know, like, the very first talk, like breaking in the door, the decision to make that talk, and then the way you won and got to give it. Like, what was your experience? No, he doesn't even remember.
So, why you know pseudo?
Yeah, it was that talk about, you know, your development environment, you know. It was about not using pseudo locally.
But probably your Neo4j talk is more recent and you haven't talked for a while, right?
No, I mean, I had talked as recently as last year. I talked every year since 2009. Yeah, but, so what's the question?
I just wanted, like, for people,
What was the process?
how do you get, so now we have people here, like, my goal here is for the folks who kind of think they might secretly want to give a talk, but haven't managed to cross that bridge. People here have crossed that bridge. How did you do it the first time? What made you take that step and do it?
I think it has to do with male overconfidence.
I mean.
Really.
We talked about that.
By the way, I'm
Right,
very tall.
right, and I think the lack of women's submissions is exactly that issue we talked about.
Well, right, and it's not only overconfidence, but it's also, you know, the height.
What?
Just shut
there's-
that door, push it back.
So, but it was also encouragement. I mean, it's the same thing that happened with Paul, right? I mean, it's like, hey, you can talk, and you know, he had that talk with Lark, and he was encouraged to say, hey, and even Jim would say, the things that we think, you know, that we take for granted here because we're doing them, you know, people want to hear about them, you know, which is what Kevin did with that screencast, you know. It was a way for him to give back and to write something and just kind of get over the it's not going to be good enough, it's not going to be perfect. And that's something that had stopped me in the past from speaking or writing. Well, it still does, from writing blog posts. As a matter of fact, the blog posts that I've written had to do with that talk, had to do with your development environment and all that stuff. And it ended up being good, and people use it, and I still now. It ended up being a script that people use to set up their machines and stuff like that.
And I remember at the time that Paul had some structure when you were applying for, you were presenting talks, and I remember there was some talk about Ro got some pointers and when you were getting accepted at talks and stuff.
Oh yeah. Paul is a very good BSer.
Feature.
And so what I do
Skilled
is
communicator.
so what you want to do it's an excellent communicator. What you want to do is write a skeleton of what you want to write, like the gist of what you want to write, send it to him, and then he sprinkles his magic unicorn dust on it, and then it comes back and it gets accepted. But then what the irony of that will happen is my thoughts started to get accepted and his work is getting accepted.
I mean, one of the things that I'm doing for people, like who likes writing their bio? So people who haven't given a talk, so is there anybody here who hasn't even done a CFP process? Like haven't tried that? So here's what happens. Let me tell you what happens. So they say, oh, tell us in like a paragraph this big what your amazing talk is going to be about. Convince me in this. And then they give you a space equally big to sing your own praises.
Yep.
Okay, this is impossible. Like, you can't write your own bio.
It gets tailor-made for
I'm already
a
feeling
different
like I'm an
mindset,
idiot.
you know.
Like, you want me to say good things about myself? So here's a pro tip for you. Get someone else to write your bio. Don't write your own bio. It just doesn't work. Like, you sound stupid. Like, people say when other people write my bio, like, they fix the bio. I talked at Ruby Nation earlier this summer, and I wrote some feeble bio. And then when I read it on their website, it was, like, way better. Because the guys, they couldn't bear it, right? They tarted up my bio for me. Because I was so, like, whatever, I'm no one. I'm not worthy, right? It was basically my bio. So some of those things are really hard. Just get someone else to do it for you. Like, your friends know what you're good at, and they can sing your praises.
Is there, I guess, does it depend on whether you're an introvert or an extrovert when you're giving a talk? Or how, if Ro and Paul are more extrovert?
I've seen talks given by people that I would, okay, here's the deal, right? There's no doubt that the extroverts have it easier. Sure, right? Absolutely they do. But if you're an introvert, does it mean that you don't have something useful to say?
No, but it's harder, so.
Not at all. So it just makes the personal challenge harder, right? The talk part and the audience part stay exactly the same. But now the challenge of dynamic presentation, holding an audience, dealing with your fear, like those are all bigger challenges for people who are more introverted. And so if you know that you're more introverted, then you have to decide whether or not to accept those challenges. But I can promise you that there are introverts in this room where I really would like to hear what you have to say, and I need to hear your voice on a bigger stage in order to get that opportunity.
So Aaron Patterson at RailsConf this past year was kind of a good example of your classic introvert that had to get up and do, really large talk keynote.
He gave a freaking
And
keynote. He
it was
shaking.
So
yeah.
nervous.
Oh yeah, he's always nervous. Like I've seen him, I think 4 or 5 times speak now, and he's always nervous. But he manages to shake it off. Like, and he's got his Freddie Mercury
Well, what does
mantra.
he say?
that
What does he
does
tell
now.
the audience from stage? I'm nervous.
Yes, yeah, that's liberating. I think.
He's not a bit defensive about it. He throws himself on our mercy. And what does the crowd do when he does that? We're like, oh, Aaron will be all right.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it evokes this incredibly sympathetic, supportive response from the audience if you don't lie. Like that truth, because here's the thing, everyone's afraid.
Yeah.
So on the topic of picking your talk, like what to talk about, these guys have got things that they've done and had success with, giving talks at multiple conferences. I think with me, the hard thing is just trying to figure out what to talk about. And yeah, we do things on a day-to-day basis that I think other people would be interested in and would get a lot of value out of if we were to talk about them. But seeing it from a beginner's mindset for me is really hard. Like I don't know what to talk to people about, right? Like I know all of the things that I know, and I don't know what they don't know.
Mm-hmm.
So having the perspective to be able to say, okay, this thing that I'm doing would be interesting. Like I always seem to tackle like the most difficult possible subject. Like I'm going to talk about object orientation.
It's this big. Yeah. So early on, somebody said something to me when I was like, okay, that's the universal problem, right? Well, I would like to give a talk, and I feel like maybe I would be okay at it, but it is impossible for me to choose a topic. And I think I could, if I had a topic, I could, like all the other barriers are gone. I could put a talk together, I can deal with the audience, I can stand up there and do it, but I don't know what it is. I can't imagine, I'm an imposter. Okay, maybe I don't think I'm an imposter, but I do think I have nothing useful to say. And I'll bet every one of you, okay, I bet this is a true statement about you, that you occasionally go into a little rant about something in that room.
Never.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Okay. So,
Occasionally is pretty
because you have an opinion about a thing. And so I got over her doing a rant years ago, and someone came up to me, it was a user group, and someone came up to me afterwards and said, where's your blog? And I was like, well, I don't have a blog. I mean, writing things down. People read them. What I do if that happened. And he said, you don't have a blog, you have to have a blog. And I was like, oh, I can't, what? I have nothing to say. Why would anybody want to hear anything I have to say? And he said, the world is divided, all the people who could possibly hear what you have to say, of them, they divide into thirds. A third of them, whatever it is, whatever you ranted about, they already know it, and they think it's old news, and they think, maybe secretly think you're a little bit stupid for wasting their time talking about it, right? There's another third of people, and they're the people who they do not have the background enough to understand. They have no conception. Your talk is wasted on them. It just went like this, right? And then there's that middle third, and you give the talk, and they come to you later, and they say, oh, I've been waiting on that. I've been waiting. I was right there, but I didn't get it. Now you told me that next thing. And so the truth is, whatever you know, there was a time when you didn't know it. And you think that what you know is obvious to everyone. I think that object-oriented design is the simplest thing on the planet, and I cannot imagine why you would want to have me here to have a conversation. And yet it turns out that everybody's in a different place, and there are some things, the things that I've learned, there are people who are coming behind, and there are people who are ahead, and that's always true. And so no matter what you have to say, there's an audience that has not quite reached it, and they will be grateful if you give them the benefit of your experience. And so it could be anything, but look, rants is where to start with. Rants, and if you go to talks and you think, this happens to me sometimes, I go to talk and I'm like, I could have done that way better. When you have that feeling, Like, okay, I'm old enough so that I remember, we don't have one here, the thing that you put on a Coke can, on a beer can, what do you call it? Koozie, right? It has a different name where I'm from. I am old enough, I remember before koozies. There was a time when this product did not exist. And here's how people dealt with beer getting hot in your hand. They complained about it. This was the solution, right? And so somebody finally said, oh, that's a problem. And I see that problem as an opportunity. And so for you, like every time you have a rant, you know there's a talk in there somewhere. That is not a problem, it's an opportunity. And so that you can just keep, if you just keep a notebook or keep a mental list or talk in your phone every time you have a rant, that point has a whole talk in it. And there's a world of those out there.
I've got something on the order of 6 talks a day.
So you're a lucky man.
At least they're all new rants.
Hey, at least share it with others that could give that talk. If you don't want
You hear me rant all the time. Go talk about the things.
You guys
I'm
can
not
keep a
stopping.
whiteboard list where every time someone had a talk idea, they went and made a note. And it could sit in the room.
It's like a demerits board.
Yeah, like, and then you could make people do. You could pick the worst possible talk and assign somebody to it as punishment.
There you go.
Whoever has the most rants at is actually required.
You could have like a rant meter.
Well, and I'll tell you this, going back to the introverts, I know there's things that Travis wants to talk about, He's over there all quiet and stuff, but he's got a lot to share and a lot of things because he reads like a maniac. I don't know if maniacs read, but he reads a lot, and he has a lot. He has a very interesting point of view and a different point of view, and just wanted to,
Just put them on the spot.
put you on the spot and tell you to give a talk.
Like that kind
It's
of.
coming.
Sorry, I was gonna ask, just pairing, talks like that, where you have an experienced speaker with somebody who's, does that work? Or is that not
I did like my first talk in isolation, and it was just because I was too embarrassed to ask for help because I felt too stupid and alone, right? Like I felt like I had to do it all by myself. I can, I no credit accrues to me about Katrina Owen's talk, but I spent a lot of time on that talk with her before she ever gave it the first time at Nordic, right? And so I think, if I may guess, to accurately reflect her feelings, she has spoken a lot about how important having a mentor was. And so for you guys, like you can encourage each other and you can mentor each other. I mean, you've got folks who've already crossed this barrier here. I mean, it's more like making a conscious decision to actively pursue this as a thing that you're doing within Hashrocket, right? Like Paul said, you never really, like, oh, that's for me? Submitting to the call is for me? Like, that's like a revelation the first time you realize, well, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so you can help each other cross the barriers that make it seem like it's not for me. Because it is, it's for every one of you. And especially for the people, it's like people who write big apps who don't know anything about design, and they make these incredible, messed up, entangled, hugely complicated messes of code. And I feel a lot of admiration for those inexperienced programmers who deal with those big, complicated, messy things, because it takes enormous focus and effort to make change and to make those apps work. Like, instead of complaining about people who write really, really, really big, towering, crappy apps, you have to admire those kids for keeping it working, even though they don't have the talents to make it easy. And introverts are kind of the same way. Like, it's harder on them. And if you want to give a talk, you have a talk in you, right? But if you want your introverts to have space on that bigger stage, support matters more toward them than it does to the rant-a-minute man. But he needs it too, I promise you.
I think sometimes it's even just applying it as some sort of sounding board where you can just kind of, we've done it in here, it's kind of like the lunch and learns where, we give the opportunity to kind of get up in front. Ro, in all his greatness, did get up and do the lunch and learn,
And it's not perfect.
and it's understandable that it's not going to be perfect every time, but the more we kind of talked about, the more practice you get at doing it, the more you can put some of it on autopilot and try to just get through it.
I mean, like, being well prepared covers many sins. And I know, like, some people, like, there's a lot of talk about talks where they say, oh, don't ad-lib it, like, just make notes and ad-lib. And I can promise you, if you watch my talks, I know I seem, I've been told, actually, I don't know that, I've been told that I seem like I'm making it up as I go on, but every word is scripted. Every word is scripted. I only get in trouble when I, like, start wandering off from the script. And then I get off in the bushes and get lost. And then I get that brain freeze thing, the rabbit in headlights thing. And then it's hard for me to gracefully like get back on and seem smooth and confident. And
I
so,
started telling jokes.
see, I mean, I'll bet you ad-lib way better than I do. I mean, everybody's different, right? Like ad-libbing might work for you. I mean, my jokes, I practice the jokes over and over again. That if you see a talk of mine and there's a joke that gets a crowd laugh, I did it in my room by myself with a clicker in my hand, walking around in circles giving the talk. Like all the talks you've seen, if you see my talks online, I can promise you that I've probably done those talks at minimum 10 times by myself in a room with the door shut. Walking around with the clicker, doing the timings, writing down where the markers are, getting it right, getting the timing right, and getting the spot on right, waiting for the laugh lines. Like you have to imagine you're going to get a laugh and you don't want to stomp on your laugh line. Like people say they don't, lots of people don't practice that much. I can tell you that I have. I would be too nervous to give talks otherwise, so it's an enormous amount of effort. But the talks are winners, and I'm sitting here today, so.
Yeah, there's another book called Confessions of a Public Speaker.
Yeah, sorry, there was a, yeah, Scott Burke, yeah.
I mean, his biggest thing is practice, 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 practice.
I thought it was interesting that you said last night that you spent about 200 hours on.
Well, and I got that out of Scott's book, The Confessions of a Public Speaker book. Like, he does a metric that says how much preparation shows respect for your audience. And if there's 200 people and they're in there, they're going to spend an hour listening to you, then if you don't spend an equal amount of time, it's disrespectful. Now, I think better speakers than me maybe can do it faster. I'm not saying that people have to do it. You know, and I'm handicapped by my desire to have nice slides and my inability to make them. So, like, I don't have any UI kind of person, so I'm in, like, you know, draw programs trying to get pixels right, which is really not, you know, so I put a shadow on that. What will it look like if I do, right? So the art is a big handicap for me, but something like that, it's not a 10-hour job putting a talk together. It's not a 20-hour. I mean, it takes me 10 hours just to practice it through an hour at a time. And lots of people put talks together in that time frame, but that's why you never hear from them again. You can really win in this game by doing good prep.
I'd like to hear Shane's perspective since he's giving talks to you.
About what was that?
About
Just
speaking
in
or what,
general?
you know, how.
Well, I mean, the major conference that I did was solely to shut Paul up. Because he would come in every year and be like, hey, jQueryConf is happening, you should submit a talk, because you know people. Like, well, that actually felt terrible. Like, I'm going to take a spot from somebody who might have a better talk than me because I know people.
So you can take advantage.
Yeah, I don't like the feeling of
Or
doing.
you're going to take a slot from somebody who's going to give a shitty talk that everyone's going to open their laptops at.
Because your talk couldn't possibly be better than any of those other talks.
I don't know.
Yeah, it's hard. Accepting that you have something to say is a very hard thing.
Well, and then I had the same problem with Stephen, where it's like, you know, the stuff that I currently find interesting is probably going to be interesting to maybe 20 people. They're all going to be sitting in the front, and they're going to be the other presenters. So I tried to go with something less advanced, and it still turned out to be very advanced. I think I lost some. I mean, I still had some questions at the end. I tried to gauge how much knowledge everyone took in by how many people asked questions at the end. Because if you've got silence at the end, they either stop paying attention or they don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's still hard for me to come up with some sort of talk idea that is gonna hit a wide audience.
You know, I've found that getting people to give you honest feedback about talks is very hard. Because people want to say, oh, it's great, I loved it, thanks, bye, see you.
Not here.
Well, because you're guy. You got that guy thing going, so maybe that'll work in your favor here. I mean, I found that it's like really, like I make a point, like the book was the same way. I wanted criticism about the book. People were like, read the book, and they'd read chapters, and they'd be like, oh yeah, it's wonderful, thanks. And I'm like, okay, that was not helpful. Like I'm afraid that I'm going to get criticized later about this content, and I need criticism now. Like I want the criticism early. And so one of the things I found was I couldn't just ask for feedback. I always ask people, tell me one thing I could change to make it better. Tell me one part that wasn't clear. Like I ask very specific questions that are countable about kinds of feedback I want. And for the book, I finally had to tell people, I will buy a beer for every constructive criticism. And then I would just give people hell and mail, right? You're like, you're never gonna earn a beer.
Then
I'm
they're
never
all
gonna
drunk.
buy you a drink if you keep on doing this. Like, I need things that I want the or the done. And so asking for feedback, like if you go after the talk and you say, how would you have changed it? Like, give people a way to give you feedback that is useful, that you can use to change behavior. Then, because right now you don't have enough information, I hear you saying, oh, maybe it was too advanced, but you don't know,
Right.
right? And so bridge that gap, ask that question. Because, you and I had a great conversation yesterday about JavaScript and CoffeeScript. There's a talk there. A lot of people want to hear that. And that kind of passion and dynamism you had in that conversation, that translates directly onto stage. Like, give that talk.
That's I always joke about doing that.
You can probably rival Stephen with the rants.
Well, these guys went to South by Southwest at one point and came back and they're like, you need to do this series, Shane Riley Hates Your Code. Where you
In the
just pick
nicest
someone,
possible way.
yeah, you just pick someone from the audience and then, that's not going too far, but.
Maybe see your coffee script.
Well, there's a way. Okay, so I go and give talks and tell people you should not be writing code the way you are. You should be writing code this other way. It's easy to do it in a way where, like, people come up to me after my talks and say, "Oh my God, that was wonderful. I have to go change all my code," right? And like sharing pain, saying we all share this painful problem and here's a solution, is really different than saying your code sucks.
Yeah.
And it's a matter of turning it around, but it's the same content. And maybe you have rants where you internally you worry that you rant that people's code sucks. But you seem like a warm, engaging guy to me. Like, I can easily imagine going. I can easily imagine being in a talk where I listened to what you said and I thought, oh my God, now that's brilliant. I have to go change all my code. Like that lesson is there for me, and people are eager to have here's the thing: everybody wants to do good work, and there's not enough information out there to tell people about how.
Good luck.
But
Yeah.
when it comes down to it, I guess the motivation to give a talk is to share something you're passionate about, or to give back to the community. And is there a balance, or is there a choice?
I think they're not mutually exclusive.
It sounds like one begets the other, right? Your desire to give back is, I guess, carried out in you delivering that thing that you feel passionate about, or talk about that.
There's no money, and it takes a lot of time. So either you want to be famous, or you're doing it for some more altruistic reason, or some combination of the above. And mostly, maybe there are some people that want to be famous, but we don't like them when we meet them, right? Like, there's something weird about being in it for yourself. And so for the rest of us, it means that it will bring you nothing except more commitments and more obligations.
More
Right?
purpose.
Well, and here we go. We're back to purpose, autonomy, and mastery, right? And so you're doing it for the good of the world, right? Like, what do you want? Why are you here? It's like you really want to change the world. We want to make the world a better place. And it doesn't really matter. Like, money doesn't matter. And fame doesn't really matter. But I have an obligation. I use open source software and I don't give back. And it took a lot of pressure to make me stand up. And so I'm sort of trying to apply the same pressure to you guys, right? Yeah. The motivations are mostly pure in this business, because it's not like you're going to get rich doing it. Cool. Go forth and speak.
Thanks, Andy.
Yeah. Thank you, guys.